Last summer, myself and my partner had rented out ourselves a beachfront cabin for a long weekend getaway. Something that we had done the year prior, so we decided to do it again. Although this time we decided to try a different location. We were supposed to be joined by two of our friends, but with their plans changing, it just ended up being the two of us. Which, in all honesty, I didn't mind, so it was nice to get some alone time together and just have a break, the two of us. The drive to our destination wasn't far, just over 3.5 hours away, so we were there in what seemed like no time. Having picked up the keys, we made the last part of our drive to our beach cabin. As we arrived, it was still mid-afternoon, and looking at our view, it was beautiful, just what we wanted. And there's something about the sound of the ocean and fresh smell of the sea that relaxes you. Wasting no time, we unloaded our stuff and made our way inside our cabin. It was spacious, and just what the two of us needed. We discussed the location to the trip we took the year prior, and although we had not long arrived, we were feeling this place on first viewings was slightly better. Wanting to make the most of the rest of the afternoon, we quickly unpacked our belongings, then went to explore the local area. We found a store and got some supplies for the weekend and a few drinks, as that evening we had planned to go on a stroll down the beachfront. We ate out that evening before heading back to our beach house and getting our drinks so we could make our way down to the beachfront. The sun had set and it was around 10 p.m. when we began our walk. We walked along and passed a few other properties spread out across the beach, all with their lights off. We had walked a good 20 minutes across the beachfront, where we managed to find a cove. It was perfect, secluded and out of the way, not seeing another person in sight. As we sat looking out at the stars and listening to the waves, we opened our drinks and toasted to our weekend together. Enjoying our drinks and our view, along with our conversation, it wasn't long before we started to become a little more intimate. But as we lived in our moment, it was then my partner sat up, bringing it to my attention. In the distance, the sound of what seemed to be whistling echoed around us. Surveying the area to pinpoint where the whistling was coming from, with it being night, I couldn't really see too far in the distance, but it sounded like someone else was out there. The whistling continued as my eyes wandered. But as I looked the opposite way, that's when my partner clenched my arm as she whispered in my ear, "There's a person watching us in the distance over to our right." Listening to what she said, I slowly turned my head to look. And sure enough, just like she had said, there was the outline of a man standing in the distance facing us. He wasn't walking by or seemingly taking in the view, rather just standing still, looking over to us, as he slowly continued to whistle. My partner, becoming slightly freaked out, suggested that we leave and walk back. Me, on the other hand, I didn't want to leave and feel like we had to, just because someone else had appeared. I told her he was probably doing what we were doing and looking for somewhere quiet. But as she acknowledged that may have been the case, she made a good point then. Why was he still just staring at us? Which was true. I told her it was okay, so I stood up and called out to him, asking if he was okay and could we help him with something. The man never responded. He again just stood there, staring over at us as he continued to whistle. I began to walk towards him, and my partner whispered to me not to. But becoming annoyed by his lack of response and weird behavior, I again called out, "Can we help you?" With more impatience in my voice that time, the man all of a sudden stopped whistling as he fell silent. He never moved, just continued to stare in our direction. Not able to see his face clearly or what this guy's problem was, I began to approach him closer, ignoring my partner's calls not to. But as I stepped closer, an unease grew inside my stomach as I finally got a better look at the guy. When I say I felt uncomfortable, it takes a lot to unnerve me, but finally seeing this guy properly, his tall, gaunt figure was approximately 6'3", with long, messy hair, accompanied with the fact he stood there motionless, with his jaw dropped and mouth wide open. As he stared at me, to be honest, it creeped me out. As I took one more step, I stopped in my tracks, as the guy out of nowhere looked up into the sky and began howling at the sky. I didn't know what the fuck this guy was on, but he clearly wasn't all there. I turned as my partner, now clearly scared, called me back. As I turned back to look at the guy, he suddenly darted and ran off in the opposite direction before falling out of sight. Thinking to myself, what just happened? I turned back, walking to my clearly distressed partner, and agreed with her that it was time we head back to the beach house. As we made our way back, power walking as fast as we couldn't help but look back out of paranoia to see if that guy was following us. But thankfully, that wasn't the case. When we were back in the safety of our cabin, I can't lie, that whole encounter put a dampener on our night, with me having to reassure my partner everything was okay. She finally began to calm, feeling more comfortable back in the cabin, as eventually we began to joke about the situation. We finished up a couple more drinks before heading to bed. Obviously, with that fresh in my head, I double-checked making sure all the windows and doors were locked. Looking out front one more time to put our minds at ease, we headed to bed. It wasn't long after we had gone to bed and I had drifted off. The sound of knocking at the door abruptly woke us. I shot up, as did my partner, who looked just as startled as me, to the knocking on the door, her mind already racing. I got up and walked to the front room. As my eyes met the front door, there was no way I was opening it until I knew who it was. So I called out, asking who was there. What we heard next sent a chill down our spines. The same whistling from the man earlier that night rang through the door, causing my partner to gasp in fear. It was the guy from earlier. My adrenaline began to race as I approached the door, looking out the side window as I gripped the door handle, making sure it was locked. As I peered outside, there was no one there. The man had moved from sight, making me feel more on edge, not knowing where he was. At this point, my partner was very shook up, understandably. In the moment, with the adrenaline pumping through me, I thought the best thing to do was to go outside, to confront this man, and scare him off. My partner, on the other hand, didn't agree, as she pleaded to call the police. I had already made my way back to the front door, as I slowly unlocked it. Stepping out cautiously, I peered to my left and right. I couldn't see any sign of the intruder. I began to make my way down the steps, trying to get a better look around the side of the beach house. When I reached the bottom, I could hear my heart beating over the sounds of the waves as I tried to locate the man, hoping that he had had his fun and moved on. That's when I heard it. I froze to the spot, slowly turning my head towards the steps I just walked down. The sound of growling echoed from beyond them. My eyes fell upon the dark figure that concealed itself in the crawl space that led underneath the beach house. And like pure nightmare fuel, a wide set of psychotic eyes stared back at me, before lunging out of the darkness towards me, revealing the same man from earlier that night as he headed towards me, barking like a crazed animal. Regretting my decision to come outside, I sprinted back up the stairs faster than I had ever moved before, locking the door, shouting at my partner to call the police as the door shuddered with loud, forceful bangs, causing her to scream as she dialed for the police in tears. Passing them over to me, I explained to the police what was happening and that we feared for our safety. It didn't take the police long to arrive, but when they did, the man was gone. We had barricaded ourselves in and didn't come out the room until we knew the police were there. We gave our statements and described the man as best we could. To our surprise, it wasn't long before one of the other officers searching the area radioed through, stating that they had the man in custody. The man was found half naked down along the beach as he resisted the officers. It was later found the guy was on numerous amounts of hard drugs, which had clearly sent the guy off the rails. The fact he howled and barked at us like it was some sort of wild animal, it was crazy. After that night, we tried to enjoy the rest of our weekend the best we could, but the whole encounter left us on edge. When we look back on that trip, we often talk about it with friends and family, but at the time, it was terrifying. I just hope that guy got the help he needed, and that we never meet again. I've always loved the outdoors and camping and the peaceful solitude that it brings. The kind you can only get in nature itself, away from the chaos everyday life can bring. That's why I took myself away last summer, as I have often before, may I add, on a solo camping trip. This time I had chosen to take myself out of state, away to a spot I'd never been before. My journey would be taking me to Virginia, where I'd be exploring different parts of the Appalachian Mountains that I'd not visited before. I had been researching and looking on hiking forums, and had seen posts regarding great locations, not sticking to your regular trails, where you could bask in the wonders of nature where it was less busy with less people around. Having planned my trip for a few months prior, I had booked my time off and was setting out on a Friday morning for my much anticipated journey. Before I started my getaway break, I had a good 5-hour journey to drive. But starting out early, with caffeine my friend and an early stop along the way for some food and to fill the tank, the journey went by in no time. As I neared my destination, the last, what felt hour of the drive was just weaving dirt roads that fed deeper into the tall trees that surrounded me. And the further I drove, the more noticeable it was that civilization was being left behind. Only the odd passing truck heading in the opposite direction. When I finally reached my endpoint, it was mid-afternoon, around 3 p.m. I still had hours of daylight ahead of me, so without wasting any time, I began my ascent into the clearing ahead of me. Looking around, it was just as I wanted, nature at its finest. Beautiful surroundings with the distinct smell of the open outdoors as I breathed in the fresh air. As I continued on my journey, the heat of the warm August evening began to fade as the sun dropped, helping the forest to cool. Remembering my route back, I came across a great flat clearing that I thought was perfect to set up my tent and camp for the night. So, setting everything up, I readied myself some food and grabbed a bottle of beer, sitting in my chair, and watching the light fade through the pockets of trees. By 10, when night fell, I had set up my fire, bringing a warm glow to my camp, as I sat there with my thoughts as you often do when camping alone. Finishing up one more beer as I sat listening to the sounds around me, that's when I saw it. As I stared into the distance, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it might have just been me seeing things, a slight trick of my eyes. But as I focused, I could see the flashing of a light in the far distance, through the trees. It wasn't a natural flash of, say, the moonlight reflecting off something. No. It was what seemed to be the flashing of a light, and the way it flashed on and off slowly. It was like a signal or something trying to get someone's attention. What I did know, though, through all my years of camping, was that it was definitely not something you're used to seeing when you're in the middle of nowhere. I remember staring at it for a good few minutes, thinking to myself, what could it be? Was there other people out here, which was obviously a possibility? Was it someone in need of help? Why was it flashing in my direction? Intrigued by the light, having passed no one all day, and wanting to know my surroundings, there was only one way I would find out, and that's when I made the decision to go and check out what the source of the light was. Placing my beer aside and readying my own headlight, and my hunting knife just in case, I headed out into the direction of the mysterious light source. Questions running through my mind as to what it could be. Making my way through the trees, I was straying quite a distance from my camp, as the light was further than I anticipated. It wasn't close, yet visible. Then more questions were raised as they flooded my mind, because the more I neared, the rhythm of the light flashing began to change. It got quicker and flashed more erratically. It was strange, but my determination to uncover the mystery outweighed my more logical thinking, as my mind leaned toward someone lost, or maybe needing help. After walking and straying quite a distance from my own camp, I was finally on the doorstep of where the light was coming from. And as I approached, the erratic flashing of the light stopped, staying permanently on, causing me to squint, trying to battle for its brightness. Walking towards the light, I began to look around the area, but I couldn't see anything. Then, to my surprise, the bright light that had lured me in suddenly went out, coating the area into darkness, with my headlamp then being the only source of light that just about lit up the ground in front of me. My thoughts then began to take a turn, as concern started to seep into my mind. The realization the light had been turned off by someone. I stood where I was as I looked ahead through the trees in front of me, trying to make out what lay ahead. Then, as my eyes passed over two narrow trees ahead of me, I froze. Nestled in the darkness between the two trees, I could make out the figure of what looked to be another person standing there. I couldn't see them fully, and my headlamp not reaching that far, I didn't know what to do. And in the moment, hoping for a response, I called out, "Hello?" I got no response. The figure just stood there, static, trying to keep my voice as steady as I could, even though I was now beyond creeped out as to why someone would be out there, standing there unresponsive. I asked, "Are you okay?" Again, there was no response. I had regretted my choice of coming to see what the source of the light was, not really knowing what the fuck was happening, or why whoever it was not responding to me. It was what happened next that made me feel sick, as a ball of fear built in the pit of my stomach. The outline of another figure joined the person. There was more than one person in front of me. Slowly backing my way up, fearing I'd walked into something I shouldn't have. It was then the beam of the bright light once again near blinded me. Using my hand to shield the light, the sound that reached my ears sent my heart racing. The sound of oncoming footsteps traveling towards me. Knowing there was something very wrong, I turned and began sprinting in the direction of my camp. As I did, I could hear the footsteps behind me, picking up their pace. Whoever it was now chasing me. And that feeling of knowing someone was chasing you, I can't describe it. My legs were like jelly, but the adrenaline coursing through me gave me an extra wind that I didn't know I had. Fight or flight, as they say. But this was one situation I didn't care to fight. I needed to get out, fast. As I hurtled through the forest, I reached my clearing. Luckily, I was already wearing my jacket with my keys and phone in it. Having no time or desire to gather my belongings, I kept going. My only thought was getting to my car. I didn't stop. I knew I couldn't. There wasn't much distance between me and whoever the people were behind me. No matter how much I was running out of steam, I couldn't slow down. As I broke from the tree lining, the welcome sight of my car lay ahead of me, causing me to get a second wind as I sprinted towards it. Throwing myself inside, I automatically locked the doors. Looking out my window, I could now see the two figures, standing in the tree lining where I'd just exited. But now I had a better view, and the sight I saw will always haunt me. The two people perusing me were masked. Not balaclavas, not store-bought masks, but what I'd describe as homemade, with what seemed to be the skulls of dead animals. As one of them lifted something in their arms, my heart raced, seeing they were armed with what looked to be a crossbow. I started my car, slamming my foot down on the accelerator. As I turned, I heard the sound of a thump on the side of my car. Not knowing what it was, I sped out of there, not looking back. Unable to control my adrenaline, as I drove, I didn't stop until I was off those dirt roads, and back on a normal man-made road. Feeling I was now safe, I pulled over, stepping out of my car to compose myself. And what I saw, I consider a blessing from above. The sound of the thud I had heard as I took off was none other than a bolt from the crossbow sticking out of the side of my car, inches away from my back tire. Whoever those people were trying to stop me from leaving. Thinking back on it over the following days and weeks, it dawned on me that they could have probably shot me with the crossbow as they chased me, but they didn't. They tried to shoot out my tire when they could have shot at me as I sat in the car, but they didn't. It suggests they didn't want to kill me, and that haunts me even more. Who were they, and what did they want with me? Telling people my encounter is often met with skepticism, but friends and family feel I had a lucky escape, and people I've spoken to online all seem to suggest it was in fact more than likely a living community that live out in the mountains. Maybe I'd strayed too close to a settlement. It is said to be known that there are native tribes or communities that live deep within the mountains. With me not following a known trail, it's a possibility I came across this. I obviously reported my encounter to the police at the time, but nothing ever came from it. Since that summer, I have only stuck to known trails when camping, and never explore unknown areas on my own. Thank you for joining us and watching this chilling video. We hope you enjoyed this topic, and you found the fear within. What other subjects would you like to hear soon? Let us know in the comments what creeps you out. If you're new here, say hello, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Become a part of the Horror Motives world. See you soon with another terrifying video.